Hey everyone, it's Ivan, kitbatch.com, out here for another gun review, and today, talking about this sweet little gun right here. This is the Brownells BRN-180 Gen 2 in 7.62 by 39. You may have seen some of my other reviews. I've actually reviewed this gun, chambered in 300 blackout, as well as 5.56. Makes a actually really cool suppressor host, in part because it is a piston. So if you're unfamiliar with the AR-180, which this is basically designed after, it is Stoner's piston gun. So rather than direct impingement, uses a piston, and the original was actually all just like folded steel. It was pretty inexpensive to manufacture. I think we've kind of lost our ability to like stamp steel and stuff these days. So now it is basically all billet. And so Brownells a while back actually set to work making these to include lowers for them, which basically have Picatinny on the back end, so you can put stocks on them or folding, whatever you want. Again, not direct impingement, does not need a buffer tube. And they basically partnered with Primary Weapon Systems, actually out of Idaho, and they are pretty well known for making piston guns, like piston ARs. And so they basically partnered with them to make this piston gun for them, and they're a ton of fun. I will say 7.62 by 39, on the one hand, I actually really love the caliber. It is very capable for killing things, especially with soft point, and relatively inexpensive to shoot. So being able to have one, yeah, that's awesome. But when I first got my couple of them, there was actually a lot of problems initially with the first BRN-180s in 7.62 by 39. Consequently, sent it back a couple times. Finally, they were like, we need to get this sorted out. Appreciate your feedback. And they actually recalled them, which good on them, because then they figured it out, sorted it, and released them again, to which this is one from that batch when they ended up getting re-released. And since having my hands on this one, I've put in a lot of time with it. Before I dive into my use and everything like that with this, I will speak to a couple of upgrades of sorts. One, when these come stock, they at least used to have basically this 3-prong flash hider and this little charging handle right here, which is really good for just like ripping skin off your knuckles. And so those two things I promptly ended up replacing. One, the muzzle device, this guy right here. One, I don't know how much any flash hider is going to actually reduce flash on a 10.5 inch 7.62 by 39, but more important to me is I want to be able to run suppressed. So this right here is one of the Reardon manufacturing 3-prong flash hiders. This is the Q Trash Panda 30 cal silencer. And so, yeah, you can use the Reardon mounts with these cans. Someone's going to say something about warranty. I have no idea. I know I've shot it, haven't had any issues. So I ended up replacing that, and I ended up actually replacing the charging handle with a couple different ones. I'll go over those more later. But yeah, one of the coolest things about this gun is the fact to position. This piece right here, you can flip it between 1 and 2, 1 being unsuppressed and 2 being suppressed. So restricting that gas going back, which all said and done basically makes for a really, really awesome suppressor host. Since I've had this gun, I've put a lot of rounds through it. And goes back to those things I actually already mentioned. One, it's an awesome suppressor host, and 2, 7.62 by 39, relatively inexpensive. So yeah, been shooting this thing a ton. Some of it just range days out there, just getting reps. And this gun has gone through a number of different configurations as far as optics setups, things like that. Right now I currently have these Peak iron sights by Scalarworks on there, but yeah, shot it with a number of different optics too, and yeah, shoot house runs, all kinds of stuff. And another place I put a lot of rounds through this gun was actually shooting a competition, High Desert Brutality. Ton of fun, awesome competition, and something I really liked that most competitions don't have is largely is extended distances. And so I actually shot the gun basically in this configuration. I shot in the Irons division, I also shot in Partisan division, like separately. But for the Irons division, I shot this setup and man, had to earn it. Pretty much all of the stages, the rifle shooting was 200 to 500 yards. Again, 10.5 inch 7.62 by 39 with these Scalarworks Peak iron sights. Yeah, definitely had to earn it. Fortunately, at the further at most of them were further distances. Someone was spotting, so they'd tell you if you're missing, man, tell you if you're hitting. And this was so much fun to shoot out there at that competition. All in all, I've just really enjoyed shooting this gun. It's a blast, like it is fun. And real quick, before I go further, I guess I'll give you a little rundown of the configuration it's in right now. Right there is my Trash Panda silencer. And back here, we have the Scalarworks Peak iron sights, then the Hot Pocket by Lunar Concepts, and coming back, aftermarket charging handle, that one right there by Wolfpack Armory. Again, Peak iron sights, and this is Brownell's forged lower. Inside it, I have basically just kind of standard lower parts kit, and moving back, it has that 1913 rail. So I have the Occam Defense, one of their stocks, to include the wooden insert for it. One of the best upgrades for BRN-180, any of the models, is actually a charging handle. I get it, like both the muzzle device as well as that charging handle with that kind of dog leg and knurling. Kind of the most recognizable parts of this gun as far as like, oh, AR-180, because again, stamped steel versus billet, M-lock, all that other stuff. But yeah, do not care for that thing. Definitely has a tendency to go ahead and like rip skin off knuckles. So used a couple different ones, and both kind of pros and cons to both of them. They're both a huge improvement over the stock one, honestly. This one right here is relatively big, sticks out a bit, but it works pretty good. This one is by Wolfpack Armory, super simple to install. I will say that laying against you, depending on how your gun's resting, not super comfortable. Conversely, I've used this one also, comparison, quite a bit smaller, and just knurling, but definitely is significant. Again, this one just coming straight out, significant improvement over the stock one. This one is by AR-180 parts. Something else worth mentioning, the dust cover that came on it is no longer on it. I think a little retention piece basically came off and it disappeared from my life forever. So yeah, no dust cover on it. Does it matter? It can. I mean, straight down in there is your fire control group. So yeah, you could potentially get something in there and run into issues. Have I had issues with it? No, I haven't, but that happened. Magazines, Durmag ammunition storage components, ASC. I've had great luck with both of them and they continue to run. As I mentioned, I had a bunch of issues initially with this gun, to include any mags I tried. Whatever the issue was, it got resolved, and since then, this thing has been running great. Have I had any other issues with it though? Ironically, when I set out to do some accuracy testing. When I went to go shoot some groups, I had pulled the irons off this, threw a magnified optic on it, put some targets out, 100 yards, had a bunch of different ammo to try, and went to go shoot those first shots. I'm like, bam! Like that. That felt weird, like the recoil impulse was off. And I'm like, what just happened there? And sure enough, it fired, but it didn't chamber around. And I'm like, that's pretty weird. Hadn't shot the gun for quite a while. Took it home, like pulled it apart, lubed it, went back out, and same thing happened. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And sure enough, again, this is like a reciprocating bolt. So when you fire, that piston basically hits your bolt comes back, comes forward, strips around, chambers it, all that. Did not move at all. So I'm like, that's pretty weird. So I ended up reaching out to Brownells, who in turn reached out to PWS, who manufactures the uppers for them, and was like, hey, this is what happened. They were very quick, very responsive to get it fixed, basically end up replacing the part. By the part, I mean up here where the piston is, like it would not move. And so part of me was like, hey, did this somehow get turned to the point where it's not allowing any gas? Because again, like did not move. And no, didn't get, well, one, it can't get turned. There's detents, but I was like, maybe. And not the case. So full circle, what happened? Magic. Actually, what we're going with right now, what we think happened, was basically a piece of jacket somehow came up into that gas port and wedged itself essentially in kind of that first cup in the piston to effectively just shut off all gas. So ended up having to replace that, and since then done a bunch of shooting, works great, but yeah, like totally freak occurrence. And as a quick aside, someone's gonna be like, see, direct impingement. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. It's one of those where things can and do happen, especially like over a long enough timeline. Like sometimes there are some like just really bizarre, strange things, malfunctions, things along those lines. And this happened to be one of them. So at any rate, they took care of it and finally got back out to go do that accuracy testing. Keeping in mind, 10.5 inch 7.62 by 39, but had a number of different loads, shooting at 100 yards, and basically went through shooting 5-shot groups. And here's what I got. Shooting some Brownell 125 grain soft point. First group coming in at 1.23 MOA. And my second group shooting that Brownell with a flyer coming in at 2.9 MOA. We get rid of that flyer, drops down to 1.0 MOA. Next, shooting some PPU soft nose round point. Stuff did not like to feed very well. First group with a flyer coming in at 3.2 MOA. Getting rid of that flyer, drops down to 1.1 MOA. My second group with that ammo coming in at 2.13 MOA. Moving on to some Brownell 123 grain full metal jacket. First group coming in at 2.0 MOA. My second group coming in at 2.3 MOA. Then shooting some Idaho Ordnance Factory 123 grain SSTs. First group, again with a flyer, coming in at 2.6 MOA. Without that flyer, dropping down to 1.5 MOA. And continuing with my flyers, second group with that Idaho Ordnance Factory coming in at 2.75 MOA. Getting rid of it, drops down to a crazy 0.5 MOA. Next, shooting some Hornady Black 123 grain SST. First group coming in at 2.0 MOA. And my second group of that Hornady coming in at 1.9 MOA. Then going for the bottom of the bucket, 122 grain Wolf full metal jacket. First group coming in at 4.3 MOA. My second group coming in at 3.5 MOA. Then using some Ingham 123 grain full metal jacket. First group coming in at 1.97 MOA. Second group opening up some to 3.1 MOA. Is this gun capable of more than that? Probably with another better shooter behind it, but again, that's what I got out there that day. To include a bunch of flyers, probably because it was not incredibly warm. But yeah, again, 10.5 inch 7.62 by 39. Am I happy with it? Honestly, yeah. I mean, Be cool if it was a half MOA gun, but I don't think it is. And I'm also not a half MOA shooter all day, every day. No, most people aren't either. So will it work though? Absolutely. Like, as evidenced by High Desert Brutality. Again, shooting this thing with irons 2 to like 500 yards. Granted, like, man, you really had to earn it, especially at like 500. You basically, you'd aim in and then you just float it straight up. You'd be like, right about there. Get a correction, input that correction into nothingness, floating this thing up there. And yeah, like, it'll shoot. And it's a lot of fun. Thoughts overall? It's fun, man. I enjoy this gun. On the one hand, it is, whether it's this or 300 Blackout or 5.56, awesome suppressor host. Like, it's really cool. Being this piston, it is just really nice, really fun, soft shooting gun, and not a ton of gas coming back comparatively. And yeah, it's a good time. I really like 7.62 by 39 also, especially soft points, man. Like, yeah, I don't want to get shot with anything to include soft point 7.62 by 39. Stuff is nasty. And being able to shoot relatively inexpensively. And I think as far as having the capability of shooting that caliber, might be a good thing, because pretty common round. And this gives you an option outside of basically an AK. Granted, there are some like 7.62 by 39 like AR platform guns, which this kind of is, kind of a merging of those two. And yeah, I've had fun with it. Some of the problems guns like this have been bolts, because largely using a AR-15 bolt, but the head of 7.62 by 39 is bigger, so you have less material. I know you can break bolts. I've never had an issue with this, but I know it's something that people have had happen. I don't know specifically with this, but especially in like ARs. Again, haven't ran into anything like that. I did have that one total like freak wild thing where a piece of jacket somehow wedged and killed the piston, at which point turned into basically a single shot, charged every time. But yeah, that was pretty weird. I just continue to shoot this and continue to have fun with it. Price-wise, the uppers are sold separately, and as an aside, you can put them on any AR-15 lower. So if you have a lower at home, which you probably do, you can just get an upper, throw it on there, get some magazines, you're good to go. Or if you want, you can get one of their lowers. Their lowers, so I guess real quick on the uppers, around 800, 850 bucks, I think. 7.62 by 39, come in 10.5 as well as 16-inch. And their lowers, their forged one, which this is, I want to say about 100 bucks. Billet one's like 150 bucks. Both of them have Picatinny rail on the back. So without that buffer tube, if you want, you can put a folding stock, something along those lines. I have this on here because it's pretty fun. I think it looks pretty cool. And yeah, no, been having a blast with this gun. If it's something you're interested in, there'll be links down below. You can check all that stuff out. But yeah, overall, pretty neat offering by Brownells. But as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.